If you want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond, then you're in the right place. This is the Property XPerts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Hello and welcome back if you're new. Welcome back if you're old, and welcome if you're new. But you're thinking from that intro, who are these legends that should be on TV? Introduce myself, Jack Jiggins, and my business partner, Ben Richards. We tune in every Friday live to give you the highs and lows of the various property and construction related businesses that we run. And today we're talking a lot about tax and the new tax changes. Our vision is to deliver 1,000 homes, which we hope to be £1 billion worth of property. I met with a potential investor today who asked if we're doing the 1,000 target for the government. And I sort of said, not really. And we like to do that with trusted investors, which brings on to our slide. We've had and have got, we're talking about the paddle. Let's go straight into the paddle, actually.
Yeah.
So 3 years in a row, we've set aside a day for our team to walk away from our desks and our projects. Obviously, they're managed very well by our contractors, and pull together to raise money for an amazing cause, which is Oxfordshire Mind. The first year we did Mind charity, and we found that Oxfordshire was really good, close to home, and they also gave us a breakdown for what all of the donations went towards, which was pretty amazing to see how we've really helped the local community and the local people. The charity paddle is on the 5th of September, so that is a week today. We will be playing as a company from 7 a.m. to midnight. That's the challenge part. But what we want to ask from you, our listeners, if you feel like you would like to donate, the donations are open, and we'd love to see some more donations coming in going towards the great cause. But secondly, it's also open to anyone that is listening that would like to come along, meet us face to face, also play a bit of paddle and try and beat us. But it's any level and experience is welcome. Our whole team's coming down. There'll be pizzas. Well, in the early days, there'll be croissants and teas and things like that. And then as we go on, it might be more pizza and beer. But it'll be a very chilled environment with a lot of property-related people there, all coming together to raise some money. And it's going to be based in Reading. It is walking distance from Reading Station, which has a 22-minute train every 15 minutes to London Paddington. So I know if you're in London, it's very convenient to get to. But yeah, let us know if you would like to come along. We will actually put the Google form link in the comment section after this video, or you could go over to one of our bios on Instagram as well. Over to investments. One of these has actually been filled now, the larger one, which is great, and we've got that secured from an investment perspective. But as you all may know, if you've been with us before, we basically propel our business taking on projects, partnering with investors. We kind of do everything else other than the capital part, and we'd love to keep broadening our horizons with future partners. We've got some smaller projects as well that could be funded, so it might be a good opportunity to get the ball rolling with us. So if you do have an interest to inquire, there's no obligations. We'll set up an initial call with either myself or Ben, and you could just find out a little bit more about our business and how it may work. And again, as I said, no obligations there. I've actually got a bit of a cold, so my voice cuts out. Ben might have to take over and hand over the baton. Today is the 29th of August, 2025 for the podcast listeners. This is the agenda of what we will be talking through. We've got some cool topics towards the end, and actually some really good questions we'll be coming to at the end of the session. So do stay tuned. Starting off with Rachel Thieves. I can't coin that because Ben came up with that idea. Yes, we're implying she's taking more from us. We'll be talking about the change that was muttered this week, which is national insurance on rental income. So if you've got rental properties, stay tuned for that topic. When do you need a business development manager in a service-based business? This was a question with a fellow business owner who asked a question, and I thought it would be very relative to highlight it. We have talked about it before, but highlight the essential requirement for having someone in sales, boosting the sales in your business. We'll be talking through our London scheme, Muswell Hill, our luxury 9 units that we're developing out and what that looks like today. We'll be talking about planning objections, which was quite a funny accusation that we had, as well as going into a little bit of detail about how I feel about sui generis planning applications and HMOs going into planning essentially. Point number 5 is working with the planning department. So slightly different, not maybe the consultation period, but working with the planning department. We'll be sharing some news on Marlow, which is fun. We'll be talking about Employer of the Year finalists, which is, we've never actually had any awards for employment, have we, Ben? Although I think if you asked our team, we would be ranked pretty highly in their estimations. And then Ben will be talking about what sectional completions are, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So if you are listening live, thank you. And please do ask questions. It doesn't cost you anything. You can ask any question you want. No question is silly enough, and see if we can answer it. Now, we'll also, because we did quite a beefy session last week, going through the Q&A from last session, but it's varied questions, so individually interesting to answer. Got through it without losing my voice.
Nice. Good stuff. Hello, everyone. If you've been tuning into the news this week, you couldn't have missed, or if you're a landlord anyway, Rachel Reeves in her wisdom is looking to also charge landlords more tax by hitting us with national insurance payments. That'll be, it's about 8%, I think, on rental income. Now, for those that haven't held property in property name, in your own personal name, since 2017, 2018, they brought in Section 24 tax, which effectively is a tax on revenue, not tax on profit, which I don't know any other business or any other like occasion where that is the case, where essentially you are taxed on everything you generate in revenue rather than actually taxed on what's left behind after mortgage payments and things like that. So basically they stopped you having the ability to offset your mortgage payments against the rental income, which is massive, and why a lot of landlords ported their portfolios over to a corporate sort of limited company structure to kind of avoid that tax, which is massive, to be honest. I've only got one property in my personal name now. It's something that I owned very early on, and lived in for a little bit, and then effectively didn't become an accidental landlord, but a lot of landlords out there are accidental landlords, where they've owned a property, they've moved to a new one, they've kept the existing one as potential sort of pension pot going forward and to help rental stock within the industry, and now the drawbacks of that in my personal name is that ultimately the asset that I own makes no money, every month. It's pretty much running at a loss because I'm paying tax on the total amount of revenue, not the actual profit I'm making within it, which makes no sense. But ultimately, I don't want to sell it at the moment. There's drawbacks to doing so. They'll get you with capital gains tax when I sell, and it's just it's a difficult position for landlords that own property in their personal name. And ultimately, this is another tax on unearned income. It's not actually profit that is being taxed. It's taxed on absolutely everything, and it's a real shit show. And to be honest, I'm really, really worried around the whole UK economy at the moment. There's been talks over the last 2 days about basically the UK having to get bailed out. The debt is spiraling unless Rachel Reeves can stun the growth, stun the whole. We're not going to get anywhere, and ultimately taxing their way out of this isn't going to work. We have to stop a very, very leaky bucket, which I think the government have at the moment, which is leaking money left, right, and centre on unnecessarily costs, on inefficiency being the main one, and ultimately until that leaky bucket is plugged, there's just we're not going to win at all. There's no instigation for growth. We're not growing as a country, and all of these tax hikes are not going to help that growth. So I think we're on a downward spiral, and I'm not really sure where it's going to end up. But this is another Another tax raid on landlords. Landlord bashing is so prevalent in the UK, and it's a shame, because I think last time I checked, about 28% of the housing stock is rental property. It needs to be more than that, because there is a demand for that level of housing. And ultimately, the private rental sector is a massive part of that. The government do not have the cash or the resources to generate enough social housing to cater for the ever-growing list of social housing requirements and needs. So the private rental sector is still a must. And I've seen a lot of HMO landlord bashing recently. Obviously, people think that generally the only people living in those HMOs is asylum seekers. And if I didn't have a bedsit and shared house to live in after uni, I'm not sure what I would have done. I wouldn't have been able to afford a 1-bedroom flat on my own. Living in a shared house gave me absolutely amazing friends and a social life that was absolutely fantastic to come out of as a young professional after university. And ultimately, people want to live in shared houses, and there is a requirement and a need for it in the UK. So we need to have HMOs. And I think the standard of HMOs that we see across our social media, with obviously the contacts that we have, and the people in the industry are doing fantastic things with private HMOs. And I think ultimately most people just see HMOs as skanky old places with mold-ridden, rat infestation and 4 people in a room. And there are landlords out there that are doing that, and that's unfortunate. But ultimately, that is the very few spoiling it for the many, in my opinion. So, this is just a further squeeze on private landlords, which is just, I don't think, going to help anyone. If they're bringing those houses back into the housing market, that might be good for people that might be able to buy them. But ultimately, it means there's a massive hole for rental properties. And we know that the queue for rental properties is, the demand for rental properties is way more than the actual supply at the moment. Hence why things have absolutely astronomically escalated over the last couple of years in terms of rental costs. And that isn't going to slow down if the number of rental properties available reduces. Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got several thoughts on this.
Several.
In addition to what Ben has mentioned, essentially, the way I like to look at it is what does this? So very, very, very rarely a tax policy comes in and everyone accepts it, pays it, and then no activity is created off the back of that. And what I mean by that is, if we have stamp duty holiday reliefs, the quickest, the busiest time of the year will be to buy or sell those assets within that period. So what happens is, taxation doesn't necessarily mean that they get a linear growth of tax income off the basis of what they're doing. What they do create is activity. So the way I look at it is existing. So there's thousands and thousands of existing landlords that own properties in their personal name. They've already been clobbered, as Ben mentioned, over the last few years. There's also talks of Rachel Reeves bringing in exit stamp duty for property owners. So the stamp duty is paid by the person exiting the property rather than the buyer buying the property. Now, if you think about it, these landlords that have, potentially worked pretty hard to invest in a pension pot, which is real estate, which it may be, they have paid stamp duty to buy the property. They're now getting taxed so much that there's probably no profit, if not negative profit. And equally, they might get taxed if they sell it at the tail end. So they've royally been pillaged. So why they're going hunkering down so much on the privately owned landlord space, I'm not really sure, because I think it will lead to landlords selling up. That we've already had, I think 2022, 140,000 properties, rental properties, went onto the open market that were owned by landlords. And if you look at our housing target, which is 300,000 homes, you would like to think that a larger percentage of those 300,000 we need to produce every year will be rented. At the moment, we're having 140,000 back a couple of years ago that were rented, now going into the private ownership market, where the debt isn't there to facilitate that. Then you look at proactivity. It's going to push everyone to owning properties into limited companies, which people are doing now anyway. So I don't think there's much tax benefit for the government in that position. So I think rents will go up significantly. I think it'll make it less affordable for people to get onto the housing ladder because rents have gone up. what happens if you're renting for X amount more, you can't afford to buy a property and save up for it. There'll be less private landlords, and there'll be motivated landlords. So for you listeners, if you're in property investment, I think it's a really good opportunity to be buying at the moment. It's a buyer's market already. And I think that it's going to become more of a buyer's market in the investment space for investment properties. And I can't see them earning more tax off this other than actually the transactional tax that they will generate, because landlords are commercially minded people. Very few people run a rental property for the passion. So they're commercially minded. So they will assess their finances and go, you know what, I'll take the equity out and I'll go and get a haircut like Rachel Reeves. They won't be sitting there waiting for the income anymore. So I think it's pretty silly. I think a lot of people in the UK think it's very silly. Maybe there's an angle of trying to actually drive more stamp duty income, because rather than charging 8% of rents, they're charging a flat fee of maybe a 2% or 3% surcharge on STLT of the total value of the sale. That might be a thing. And maybe they're trying to push out unprofessional outfits that don't know how to manage properties properly. So they're sort of weeding people out to do it that way. But huge opportunity for buy-to-let and rental growth, huge opportunity for buying. And yeah, sucks for people that thought they had it all set up and they're just being taxed again. I think it's a real shame.
Yeah, I think like longer term potential issues on this as well is sort of a lot of people will hold on to properties that they've maybe lived in for a while and become an accidental landlord with one or two properties. Like I think the figure is something like is it 94% of landlords only have one property, which is staggering, really. That's a lot of people that have just moved on, managed to afford to kind of to keep a previous property that they've once lived in, for example, and they see it more as their pension pot. And I think that idea of keeping property longer term as a hedge against pensions is dwindling. And the pension, the wider landscape with pensions in the UK is fucked. It really is it's not going to last. Like pensions aren't what they used to be, and they're not going to be in the longer term. So by pillaging properties now from landlords at this point, and if they're having to sell now with the view that actually they're just going to rely on the state pension going forward, or private pensions that might have paid into over the longer term, those people are also going to be screwed. The pension, the state pension isn't going to be able to cope with that additional load from people that don't have the property to live off as well. And I do think longer term it's both short term it's short-sighted, and longer term it's also an issue on the wider pension industry and schemes. So yeah, I think it's a real shit show, and yeah, we would be interested to know what you guys think down below, because it's scary times for the UK, and I think this is just another big problem that is not going to aid the growth and the stimulation of the economy one bit. Anyway,
I was just going to touch on speaking of like the Colney Hatch Lane owner. If you have wealthy people in the UK that own real estate, that might be the only thing holding them into the UK. They might have sold their business or retired, or been successful in their careers. And if they've got, I would like to hazard a guess, most of these landlords own real estate in their own personal name, have probably bought them as investment over 15 years ago, because kind of in the last 10 to 15 years, people have kind of caught on to the value of having them in the limited company structure. I think pre that, you've got these people that may actually say, well, I don't own any property there now. The tax is ridiculous. The inheritance tax is, ridiculous. And they might just bugger off. And they're also talking about potentially taxing if you leave the UK. So this is, we've had the most wealthy people in the UK leave the country. And I mean, if you think about all of the non-exec advisors in the UK, They're all successful people that live in the UK, and we're losing them to foster the growth of the grassroots of the country. So it's just short-sighted, essentially.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a bit of negativity, bit of a rant. Let's move on, I think.
Yeah, cool.
When do you need a BDM in a service-based business?
Yesterday. You weren't privy to the conversation I had with actually one of our very routine listeners, followers, running his own business, service-based business, but is also in property. Really good guy, so shout out to Ryan, but not Ryan Beaumont, another Brian. But essentially he said, when did you hire a BDM in your service-based business? And the coincidence of this conversation came up because we hired a BDM in XP Surveys as soon as we went on to James Sinclair's podcast and got beaten up by James Sinclair saying, why aren't you doing this sooner? Take risk, be entrepreneurial. And I would say it's probably been one of the more pivotal parts of our business to the success that XP Surveys has, in its infancy, already achieved. And the question is really difficult because it's like, when do you bring in more overhead against the potential of more sales? And we always talked about before on this program, like basically the love heart of business. If you can master the sales and you can master the operations, you've got a successful, profitable business. We're talking about purely the sales, because what typically happens is sales go up and then you can't sustain the level of service or level of product production that you need. And then you may actually go, actually, hang on, we can't sell that much. We need to do less. And actually, we've got this problem to some degree, which we've recruited for, and we're kind of coming out of it now in Central Suites, where we've got all these parties, investors that want to do portfolio builder, but we had so much to do ourselves that we couldn't service more. So we kind of said we just can't do any more right this moment. And that's kind of the whole point of hiring into the team to then boost that operations. But it amazed me. Ryan was saying that could easily do 20K months every month. He's responsible for the sales, which is really common as a business founder. You're typically forged into the sales part of the role because it's charismatic. You're very motivated because it's your business. You can see the funds coming in as revenue. And typically business owners do spread onto the, dynamo personality, Ben, where they're like typically quite outgoing, quite sharp, quite a go-getter, sometimes salesy, which is typically a BDM's personality too. But anyway, so we're having this conversation. He said when he has time away or focuses on his other property businesses, that revenue will dwindle down sometimes significantly, over half. And I'm thinking this BDM could come now, because if you think about it, with 1 or 2 good months, which won't take long, you're in a position where you can get cracking and work with a BDM straight away. I would have said our BDM role in XP Surveys is a bit more of a hybrid, because Trevor definitely helps out with a lot of operations, a lot of service quality, can even get in there and do some technical stuff from a surveying perspective. So it is quite a broad role, but the recurring revenue is really where the value is realized there. And they say that if you can get a BDM up to paying their way within 3 months, that is a good point to make the hire. So using Ryan's example, if he's billing 20K and then some months he's billing less than half of that, you're not going to get a BDM that expects 10 grand a month. So quite quickly, you're going to recoup that value into the business, alleviate him from maybe even the sales to focus more on strategy, hiring, organization management, foster partnerships, investment, whatever it is, whatever the high value tasks that a business owner should be doing could then be focused on. So what a really good exercise that you can do with this is actually just cash flow a salary coming into the business in your forecast. So obviously your P&L and your management of your finances is today and yesterday. But then if you put a forecast in place and you said, right, if I did bring in a BDM and I did consistently bill over 20 grand a month and I did step away from the sales, what does that look like over a forecasted period? And that's pretty much what Ryan's agreed to do. So he's now getting a job advert out. So if there's any BDMs based in the Midlands, let me know. I'll push you towards Ryan. But I thought that would be useful to share for a service-based business.
Yeah, nice. Sales is absolutely critical, especially at a young stage of a business. And having a BDM that is dedicated to that role is just, I think, fundamental. I think, you know, when we look at all the businesses that we run, we always say the first hire should always be admin, administration, business, you know, business assistant type stuff, to take all the way of that low level sort of you know, repetitive sort of menial tasks that just need doing, but just need someone to do it. And then the second would probably be a BDM to run that sales process and make sure that those sales come trickling in, because as a entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're juggling lots of plates, and ultimately, like Jack says, you sort of need to have somebody dedicated to the role. So when you're not available and you're doing other stuff, that revenue is still ticking in and coming into the business. So yeah, lots of good tips there. Cool. Just a quick update on our Colney Hatch Lane, Muswell Hill project. This is the conversion of 2 large semi-detached properties with a large 100 square meter basement dig, various extensions at front and back, and loft extensions, external terraces. Yeah, a bit of a beast, but it's coming along nicely. Now it's a conversion into 9 flats, and the upper level 5 flats will be finished by the end of September. So 3 to 4 weeks from now. You can see in the middle photo, kitchen has you know, kitchens on those upper floor. 5 flats are in. The worktops have been templated. Obviously, still lots of work to do. A lot of the flooring is down, which is why it's protected at the moment. We've got tiling going in on the bathrooms, and Thames Water actually have nothing to really complain about in terms of their connections on this particular project. For once, they were pretty timely, and yeah, not a huge amount of delay or issues, other than yesterday when I was on site. So we basically forgot, or well, forgot, I guess. We were hoping to use the existing supply on site for our landlord water supply. Turns out we can't. So we did run a additional pipe to the boundary for connecting in for the landlord supply. But ultimately, the team of Thames Water guys on site said it's not on their list of things to do, even though to replace a lead pipe is actually free of charge with Thames Water. But that team in their department doesn't talk to the on-site team or their department. So to basically say, look, we've got an open trench, we've got a pipe to the boundary, connect it up for us whilst you're doing all this work, doesn't compute. You know, it just... They were just having absolutely none of it. I mean, the common sense approach is you're there, you're connecting, 9 other supplies, connect this one extra one whilst it's all open trench before you cover it over, instead of waiting 3 months to come back to uncover the trench, to then do it free of charge, even though it's costing them money. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever from a practical perspective. But, you know, the team on site basically just does, you know, what they're told to do on their sheet, and computer says no around everything else. So a bit frustrating. We've got a workaround, and we're going to be moving forward with that. But just, you know, it's no wonder Thames Water are up shit's creek without a paddle in terms of lost huge amounts of money over the last couple of years, had to be, you know, bought out and all this sort of stuff. And it's things like this. You know, it probably cost them the best part of £1,000, 1,500 quid to send somebody out, probably more actually with the traffic management. So to say that they're going to be replacing the lead pipe for free when they could have done it now at literally like 0 extra cost and save themselves the 1,200, 1,500 quid makes no financial sense whatsoever. But anyway, that's their process and we have to live with it. But it's coming along nicely. By the end of the month, September, we will have 5 flats fully finished. They're really starting to take shape now. They're looking really smart. That penthouse apartment is looking absolutely incredible. So really looking forward to moving forward. Actually, one thing that I didn't take a photo of is the doors. Our doors are about 2.25 in height. So a lot taller than normal doors. Really makes a massive difference to make the space feel a lot bigger and just have something that's a little bit different in terms of the interior design. They look absolutely amazing. So yeah, really looking forward to see this one progress over the next 3 or 4 weeks, because it's going to start to take shape massively. The painters are in next week, so architrave is on, as you can see. Skirtings are in. We've got some coving going in certain areas, and it's taking shape nicely. And you've had some fun with some planning comments. Yes, I read this one. Yeah, it's fine.
I'm gonna have to read out the highlight points for the podcast listeners, but The topic I would like to speak about is we don't do many sui generis HMO planning applications, just because I kind of feel that it, from an ownership perspective, makes a house, and I'm talking like 9, 10, 11, 12 bed HMOs. I kind of feel like it loses a bit of home character when there's just so many. It feels almost like a hostel dorm. But we've had opportunities to create 7 bedrooms, which I actually think we can keep when we've got enough footprint. And this house that we're referring to has actually got a 36 meter squared kitchen dining space, which is huge. You can actually still make it feel like a nice home. But we've never really gone down the route of sui generis planning applications unless we really can get it. It's a Wallingford that we've just got approved and complete and is now finished. And we got our first tenant moving in just after building control is signed off. Is a 7 bed, but it's again huge. It's like 2,500 square feet. So we can accommodate for that size. But anyway, I thought I'd share this feedback from a consultation period because I can't see any areas where it's so basically if we were to convert this house to a 6-bedroom HMO, we wouldn't have had to notify planning or the neighbours until we started letting the property. And actually, we've typically had severe complaints. We had a project in Henley, which was a 6-bedroom HMO. We had complaints from the neighbours. One of the neighbours actually called the council. Once we'd finished the project, obviously we didn't need planning in that instance. Once we'd finished the project, they apologised to the council and said, actually, we made a mistake. The tenants are lovely. There's not as many cars as if there were if it was a private home. And we really like having the HMO in our housing estate. So once we'd proven to them that we weren't absolute
cowboys,
greedy landlords, they actually preferred it being in their estate. So interesting when we've had 27 objections on this road and there's not many more than 27 homes. And if I'll read it out here so the listeners can hear it, but it says, here we go again. If you bothered to leave your ivory tower and possibly do some physical geography, you will see for yourself that an HMO in Edward Street will not work. I'll correct on that point because we actually already have a fully operational and working HMO on Edward Street, and it's been there for 7 years. So it's just the point where they're assuming that there's going to be 6 cars because there's 6 beds and blah de blah de blah. And it's I get it. The road is busy and there's cars on the road, but actually, when you look at a typical household, which is typically 2 adults and potentially a family, you could expect that there's going to be a minimum of 2 cars. In our other HMO on Edward Street, our tenants have 0 cars. So we're actually having a positive impact on the parking. So it's just that lead towards the worst possible outcome. 27 people out, it's probably 50% of the road that bothered to make a comment have assumed the worst case. And unbeknown to them, we already have one on Edward Street that's never been a problem. So, it's just frustrating to see. And, it did really make me laugh when I was told to leave my ivory tower, which I don't believe I have one because they'll see me walking up and down the road with plasterboard and doing the things that a very hands-on landlord.
I mean, this is the general perception of private landlords, though, that we're all like minted and just living on a beach somewhere and don't have a clue what reality is. It's hard work, we're providing a service to residents, and you with your business provide an amazing service, and everyone that lives within Central Suites homes absolutely love it. I loved living in a HMO when I was a young professional out of uni, and there's such a need for it, yet people think that I mean, I ranted about this earlier, so I won't go anymore. Go on.
I completely agree. I mean, the sort of middle to late aging population need to understand that the way an economy is built is people being able to afford to live in a certain area to drive employment. Abingdon's got a really, really strong employment level because of the 2 science parks. There's public transport there, and a lot of our tenants actually use that because it's better than parking there at the place of work. But it's just fair enough if you just say parking is a concern. Can you prove to us that is not going to make anything worse? that's a reasonable query. But anyway, 27 parking objections, and I would confidently say we've got over 100 rooms in Abingdon. I would confidently say our average property and tenants have less cars than a family home on average. So yeah, it's funny how you jump on the bandwagon and think it's an issue. But anyway, there's my piece over about consultation periods and the objections. But my main point I actually wanted to get at is a little bit of this. So we're currently in this application as a certificate of lawful use for a 6-bedroom HMO with the proposal that would potentially look at sui generis for an additional bedroom. The house is massive, so if we don't go for that additional bedroom, it's just going to be a study. And also we could actually push for cohabiting tenant rooms. So the tenant issue, we could still have more tenants in there, so the 7th bedroom wouldn't be an issue anyway. But when this came back, I was like, I don't know if I can be bothered with sui generis applications. I'd much rather buy a house, under PD, convert it to a 6-bed or a 5-bed, not involve any of the neighbours that don't even know what's happening with the property, and just crack on with my life and not have to read all of these comments. This one made me laugh, so this actually makes me want to do it more. But it's the comments where it's just people don't know how HMOs work. People don't know what our stock's like. People don't know we've won awards for what we do. People don't know that the young professionals that live in our properties couldn't live there. This person that lives in this house is probably a baby boomer, probably got a very small mortgage, probably going to be significantly worth more, myself and also the tenants that are living in our properties, and they can't afford to rent anything else. So we're providing that product. So I would ask this neighbour of ours to get out of your ivory tower and come and have a look inside when we're done.
Yeah, back in your box. Anything else?
No, I'm done now.
Cool, nice, good. I'd quite like more comments like that for shits and giggles. We need a little bit more.
I put it in the team WhatsApp group, and we were chuckling.
We need more.
Yeah, I might buy a ivory tower to put on the chimney.
I think we all need more of a giggle when it comes to property development, because it's so bloody hard, so stressful. Another stress within the property development space is working with the planning department. But this is good news, actually. I've actually really enjoyed the process of working with South Ox and Vale of Whitehorse Council on this particular planning application. The planning officer has been very open, has not given cryptic responses to the point where it's them saying they don't like something but not actually saying what they do like. It's actually been a case of saying, we don't want parking on the site. Please remove the parking space. We don't want the rainwater pipes to cluster the front elevation. So raise the dormers up and have a continuous gutter that runs across to remove the level of downpipes, etc. Like, all really constructive feedback that helps us move forward and isn't just a barrier of computer says no or I don't like it type thing. It's actually been a collaborative approach where it's been back and forth of, I like this, I don't like this. Principal development is fine. We've had this feedback from the highways team. Can you do this? It's been, dare I say, a pleasure so far. I'm not going to hold my breath, because ultimately, until that planning application comes through as approved on the decision notice, nothing's for sure. But I don't know if this is a change throughout other planning authorities at the moment. The extra increase in application fees is actually giving them the resource that they need and the time they need to deliver and work collaboratively on planning applications. But on this particular one, it's been pretty good. We've made the changes. Aura have tweaked a few things to appease their comments. Within a couple of days, it's gone back through the people that we need to go back through, and it'll be resubmitted and uploaded, and hopefully we get a decision within a decent time frame. And dare I say, all of this has happened within the 8-week time frame that they're meant to abide by. So I think next week is the actual 8-week time frame. If on receipt of these updated drawings, they're satisfied, hopefully we can get an approval within the allotted time, which will be a miracle. Cool. And Marlow, we've got some happy buyers. They did allow us to share these across social media, but this is what we like to do on our handover days. So there's a home user guide that we like to give people, the operation and maintenance manuals, a nice bottle of champagne, and a nice ribbon on the door, which most people like. It's just a nice touch, just to welcome people into their new home, because for them it's a massive deal. The couple on the left hand side were absolutely lovely. Like, they wrote us a letter during the bidding process saying, they really want the property. They've lived in Marlow for a long time, and ultimately, without being too sort of dreary about it, they were like, they see themselves essentially dying there and living there for the rest of their lives. So that's incredible that we're giving homes to people like that. The other one is a first-time buyer. This is a first step onto the property ladder, and again, it's great to be providing quality homes for people like that.
I was going to say, did you hear that? I said to Mairead, I was like, did you take the ribbons away? And she said no, they wanted to keep them, which I think's
really?
I think's cute. Yeah, maybe they're going to keep it on for a while and do their own selfies, or when people come over.
Yeah, that's cost us 20 quid. Fucking hell. Luckily, we got plenty of those to come by. But yeah, it's a nice touch. I actually got that from somebody who works for London Square. They do this, and it is often one of the things that people talk about a lot when they move in, which I don't know whether that's a good thing or bad thing, whether they're talking more about the ribbon or the actual flat itself. But anyway, happy buyers. We've got another 2 completions happening next week. That will be 4 of the 8 out of the door. And then by the end of September, we will have a 5th, and a couple of other ones will trickle on thereafter. So yeah, great to see that site coming to life with happy buyers.
It's probably worth, I don't know if you mentioned the leather book that they're holding, did you?
Leather bound book, yeah. It's home user guide. So essentially that is everything that they might need to know about the property. It's the the heating, locations where the stopcock is, where all the maintenance manuals can be found, Google Drive links to online operations manuals, where local shops are, what the just sort of typical thing you'd expect to need, that gives you everything you might need to know about the property and the surrounding area when you move into a home. And I don't know if it's a legal requirement or not. I know obviously like operations manuals and stuff is, but it's something we've always done. Home user guide.
I think warrant. There's obvious things like appliance warranties and things like that you need to hand over, but I mean, I think it's such a nice touch, and also quality doing it in a actual leather book that you can keep. I mean, this house was recently renovated, and shit was everywhere. Like the manual for the washing machine was above the oven, and it's it's difficult to consolidate it and have a selective file. So I just think it's a nice touch.
Yeah. Cool. If you want to run successful finances within your business, then XERO accounting software is definitely something you should look at. You can get 50% off your first 3 months with the link down below. It's something we use in every single one of our businesses. And I will be actually jumping on Jack next Monday night with Ricky to help him set up his XERO for his property investment and development business, and hopefully share some of the tips and tricks that we use to make sure that we're using it to our best abilities. Cool. Employer of the Year finalist. Woo. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, just juggling a few items here. So fortunately for us, one of our interns that did the Reading internship put us forward as Employer of the Year finalist, which I think is the first. I don't know, has Aura had any employer awards?
We get emails saying we've won awards for it, but it's basically people saying pay us 300 quid, and you can win one of these awards. Yeah,
no, this is completely a shock to us, and actually because one of our interns has thoroughly enjoyed his internship. and put us forward. So I think a member of our team is going to be heading down to the award ceremony, and yeah, I think it'll be our first employer award, which is really nice. And it's also, you know, testament to our team in terms of everyone in the office and all the businesses being so welcome and considerate to help train the interns. And, you know, I'm not going to lie that our interns have to get stuck in. I say in the entrance sort of interview process, I'm like, this isn't where you're going to sit behind a desk. You know, I timed 2 of them to race to make some breakfast bar chairs the other day. The winning prize was a baguette from Bell Street Baguettes. So, you know, it's very hands-on and you know, it's a very, 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 very job. But it's been an absolute pleasure having them part of the business is over the summer. And I've actually been really pleasantly surprised at how polite, punctual, hardworking, smart all of our interns have been. So I'd highly recommend it to any employers out there that are looking to look at a scheme like this. And I've been really, really pleased with how all of the members have come together, and we've definitely forged some good relationships with them too. That was it, really.
Good stuff. Cool. And just a little bit on sectional completions. It's something that if you often add value through the property development planning process like we do, then this is something you're going to want to understand and really kind of get to grips with, because you need to have it in your JCT contract. So we often go back for a phased approach with our developments. So if you tune in regularly, that's something that you will see a lot of. With this particular project, for example, we originally went in for 60. This is the old Maltings for those that can't see it. We went in for 16 units initially. Then we went back in for an external application to add roof lights and windows and basically get daylight into certain areas of the building that we can unlock. We improved that planning approval from 16 to 20 units thereafter. And then we went in for another full planning application, 2 full planning applications to get 2 Muse houses in the car park and extend the front extension to add this 2.5-story section of building here as well. So ultimately going from 16 units to 23 units via various planning applications. Now, because some of those planning applications came in whilst the works was being undertaken under the original contract with the builder, it does make things very, very difficult to juggle and manage contractually and program wise and timelines and things like that. So having sectional completions within your JCT contract is something that you're going to want to include. So effectively what sectional completions are distinct sections in the contract which each have their own completion dates. So let's say you start with a completion date of March 2025 for this original 16 flats, and then the planning application comes in thereafter. You don't want the further applications affecting completion of that original contract, or unless you do, you might want to, they might overlap and you might want to have them as the same, but ultimately most of the time you want to get as much as the scheme complete as possible in the quickest time frame possible. So you'd have sectional completion date for the original contract. Then as you add the additional townhouses, for example, you have a separate completion date for the townhouses as a sectional completion. And that's the crux of it, really. Got some sort of ChatGPT kind of blurb that it sort of spits out. It says the contractor is required to complete different parts of the project at different times. Each section may have its own completion date, trigger its own practical completion, be subject to separate liquidated damages for any delays, and allow the employer to take possession and possibly use or occupy part of the building before the whole of the project is complete. Now, this is, on larger schemes like I was doing the Berkeley group, for example, each block was done at a separate date. So you have a sectional completion for each, block of 150 flats, for example, and it makes absolute sense. But even on smaller projects like this, where you are hoping to add value through the planning process, and do works in tandem that are probably going to lag behind part of the original contract, for example, you are going to want to have sectional completion dates written into your JCT contract to cater for those things. Cool. On to some Q&A from last week. So thank you very much for tuning in. Last week's session was actually all about our main five businesses that we operate. These five behind me. So Aura Architecture, XP Surveys, XP Property, Central Suites, and Aparo Social. We go deep on all of them just to give an insight into how they tick, how they operate, how they run, who's in them, what we do, what we turn over, what our goals are for next, whatever. So if you are interested to learn a little bit more about kind of how we operate our businesses and take a few tips and tricks from that, then check out last week's episode. It'll be down in on the live link on YouTube, so you can see all of the previous episodes there and tune in. But these questions came out at the back of it. So Jordan, thanks as always for tuning in. And one question for you next week. Think you mentioned looking into M&A. Is this for all businesses? Any progress on this front? Now, M&A is mergers and acquisitions. And yes, we've spoken about doing this for XP Surveys in the past, and it is absolutely something that we would still consider. We've held a couple of interviews or Zoom calls with potential sellers. I think over the last probably 2 years, we've done probably 4 or 5 interviews with other business owners that are looking to sell their surveying practice. What we have found is that a lot of those people are effectively one-man band businesses who don't really have a business as such. They've got themselves a glorified job, and they've done a very good job of growing their brand and building relationships with people. But ultimately, the value in their business is either goodwill with existing clients, or it's their kit or their the plant and equipment that they have on their books. So it's difficult to, when you're looking at smaller companies like that. I just think there's the expectations of the owners, having worked in the business for probably 15, 20 years and now looking to escape. The expectation is that their business is worth a lot more than it actually is. And it's a shame, because they've probably done well for themselves over that time frame, but the business itself doesn't generally have as much value as they expect. Are we still looking at it? Yes, we are. The progress that we've made is just those interviews. And ultimately, I think the reality of who we're looking for is probably a business that's of similar size or larger than ours. I think finding a business that turns over 160 grand, 200 grand with 1, maybe 2 people, that's not really the type of business that I think is going to help us get to where we want to be. So if we're going down the M&A route, I think it probably is with a equally sized business, like £500,000 revenue plus business to tag along and tap into. But yeah, definitely something we're looking at. Not looking at it in Aura, not looking at it in XP Property. In reality, the only business that we'd be looking to do that in is XP Surveys at the moment. Any comments on that, Jack?
Just got an email in. The planning application for the lawful development that we had, the objections has been approved.
Nice. In your face.
So comments on business, the M&A. I was at Reading Property Meet last night, and it's run by a guy called Adam Vickers, and he's had huge success buying lettings businesses, and he can literally swallow more and more and more. Like 80 to 100 property books, and I do think it is a really good avenue for some businesses. I think, as Ben said, to find the businesses in the layer that we're looking for, without where the person that's operating it, and once you remove them, there's still a really good business there, is really difficult. And then there's huge players which we're probably not in a place to perform to try and buy a £4 million turnover business just yet. Watch this space, but nothing more to add. Shall I take on Dilly's question?
Yeah, Dilly. Yeah.
Dilly's question is, when letting your property portfolio, so I'm guessing that's when you're landlord and managing agent, what structure do you use? SPV as the direct landlord to the tenant, head lease to management company, and then sublet. Also, which do lenders prefer? So if I'm really honest, I don't think lenders really care at all if you self-manage or a third party manages, which is also yourself, or a third party manages that's an estate agent. In Central Suites, we do all 3, apart from outsource the management, but in XP we do that. So technically we do all 3. And I would say that lender piece isn't really a big issue. What I would say is the huge caveat to this is VAT. So when you own an asset and you charge and you have a management company that secondary is to yours that manages it, obviously if you hit over £80,000 worth of management fees, that is a vatable income. The rent that comes from the tenant is not a vatable income. Obviously, this is not tax advice. Speak to an accountant and tax advisor, blah, blah, blah. So what I would suggest is it depends on your growth and your structure already and what your aspirations are to be as growth. The way that is most commonly set up is you have a management company that's VAT registered. That typically sits between the landlord or SPV and you. So typically that is a third party that manages it. If you own a property that is not going to hit the management threshold, so for example, Central Suites, because our management fees are quite low, because most of the stuff that we manage is our own. So the rental income is the gross, and there isn't a management company involved because it's all under one entity. We don't actually set up any degree of separation between those businesses. So it's all under one roof. So our landlord ownership and management is all in Central Suites Limited. So it completely depends on structure. But it's logical to break it up because then if you keep growing, it's all in a separate place where you can easily manage that. Hopefully that was useful.
Nice. Cool. A few more questions. Where would you think the gross stroke net yield would be if you're leasing, i.e. a guaranteed rent or basically a block of apartments to a supported social supported living provider versus a sort of private HMO? And this is something that we've done calculations on numerous occasions for our social housing portfolio. And where we generally get to is the net figure is often very similar, because with the supported living provider, there's no management, no maintenance. Often they're on a full repairing FRI insuring lease. And you're not, therefore you're not paying for electrics, you're not paying for utilities, you're not paying council tax, you're not paying any of those things. That's all passed over to the operator. Your gross rent is effectively your net rent. So although you're getting less rental income, and in our case for Croydon, for example, we get £219 per week per unit. So let's say that's close to £900 in gross rental income for each bedroom. On a private HMO rental, that might be 1050, 1100, maybe 1150, depending on the size of the room and quality. So you're looking at an extra 200, £250 per month gross income, but that soon gets eaten away when you factor in utilities, management, council tax, all of those types of costs that you then have to bear as a private landlord, private HMO landlord. So when you work it out, the net position is often pretty similar, but you get way less headaches when you're leased to a social housing provider who operates the property and tenants the property on your behalf. That's my take. Jack,
yeah,
thought?
I'll try and break it down to basically what Ben said, but try and condense it a little bit. So different types of leases are FRI, fully repairing and insuring, so the tenant's responsibility is that. I would say that's between 0 and 2%. I would be careful though, because we had a recent valuation, and just because the lender was being a dick, they valued it at 5% discount from gross to net. You then also get internally repairing and insuring, so the external works and liability is on the landlord and not the leasing agent. I would probably say that's around 5%, maybe a little bit more depending on the building, how big it is, etc. A single let property, I would say your gross to net is about 15%, so that's agent fee and operational costs included, and then HMO between 20 and 25%. 4 options.
Nice. Good. And then Jamie Tuck, thanks for your question. We have planning for a HMO room in the basement, but too costly to convert. We can add a bedroom on the ground floor, even leaving enough space for kitchen diner. Would you do a non-material amendment or just convert the other room and get the license on it? We're kind of stretched for time at this point and need to refi ASAP. It's difficult without knowing the full picture of, I sort of understand, I think what you mean. Essentially, you don't want to convert the basement because it's too costly. You've got enough space on the ground floor to get that extra bedroom on the ground floor and still have enough space for kitchen diner. I would go for an NMA. I think ultimately, you might get a license on it and you probably would get a license on it, because as long as it's compliant, most of the time the HMO license officers are more interested in what you've done as opposed to whether you've got planning approval in place and things like that. What you might come unstuck with, you've mentioned about needing to refi ASAP. If your lender questions why you haven't got a bedroom, why you haven't built out the scheme as per the planning application, there's every chance they could scupper your plans by asking for it to be installed as per the planning, or they will want the NMA or some sort of planning proof of the layout that you've actually done on site anyway. So I think the NMA is a good option, and one that you should consider, because even if you try and refi after doing the work, and even if you've got a license, they still might question why it doesn't conform with the planning approval that you've got. This might be I don't know, without knowing how many rooms there are, if it's a 6-bedroom, then technically you don't need, a 6 persons, then you don't need planning approval anyway. So yeah, without knowing more detail, difficult to give you a better answer than that. But hopefully that's useful for you nonetheless. Just before we go, another reminder on the paddle challenge, Friday the 5th of September, 7 a.m. till midnight. We will be playing for 17 hours. I do wonder what the score is going to end up after that length of time, but all for a fantastic charity in aid of mental health awareness. And either if you can't make the actual day, we would love you to donate. There will be a link down below. Please help us reach our target of, I think at the moment our target is £2,000, and we're at about 500-ish. So yeah, every little helps. Donation link down below, and have a great weekend, and see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.